They say Apple is leaving China behind. The China's golden era of manufacturing is over. But let me tell you something that the headlines won't. Apple might be walking into a trap. And that trap is a country that can't defend against its neighbor, has dusty roads ridden with potholes, cows roaming the entire country, mass religious and sectarian violence, and hardly any functional public toilets. See, moving iPhone production from China to India sounds like a bold, strategic play. Diversify your supply chain. Avoid the US-China trade war. Tap into a rising economy with a massive labor force. Sounds smart, right? Wrong. Because here's the thing. India is not ready for Apple. Not culturally, not technically, not logistically. And Apple, arguably the most demanding, perfection-obsessed tech company on Earth, is already feeling the consequences. Let's rewind for a second. China didn't become the world's factory overnight. It took decades of infrastructure building, education, training, and most importantly, discipline. When Tim Cook walks into a Foxconn facility in Shenzhen, he knows exactly what he's getting. Rows of skilled workers, robots humming in harmony, and a culture of precision that delivers almost flawless results at mind-blowing scale. That's why 95% of iPhones are still made in China. It works, it's reliable, and it's efficient. But now, under pressure from Washington and a desire to hedge its bets, Apple is trying to shift some of that production to India. Foxconn, Wistron, and Pegatron, the holy trinity of Apple's supply chain, have all opened factories in places like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. So how's that going? Well, let's just say, if Apple were handing out report cards, India would not be getting an A. Actually, it's more like an F. Let's talk numbers. According to a report from Bloomberg, at least 50% of components coming out of Indian factories have had quality issues. 50%. That means 1 out of every 2 parts isn't good enough to be used in an iPhone. For Apple, a company obsessed with quality, that's not just a hiccup. That's a disaster. And it's not just the numbers. Let's talk about Foxconn. In late 2023, news broke that a batch of Apple chips assembled in India was found to be faulty. Faulty chips. The very brain of your iPhone malfunctioning. Apple had to scrap a whole batch, costing millions. In late 2023, news broke that a batch of Apple chips assembled in India was found to be faulty. Faulty chips. The very brain of your iPhone malfunctioning. Apple had to scrap a whole batch, costing millions. Do you think that happens in Chengdu or Zhengzhou? Not on that scale, not with that frequency. The reality is, Indian factories are struggling to meet Apple's rigorous standards. The workers aren't the problem, it's the training, the oversight, the systems. In China, precision manufacturing is a lifestyle. In India, it's still catching up. A former Apple engineer anonymously told the Financial Times, "We are years away from seeing the kind of maturity in India that we see in China. It's like night and day." Here's another example. In 2022, Foxconn's plant in Sriperumbudur, near Chennai, had to shut down for weeks after workers protested over food poisoning in the company's dormitories. That kind of unrest is rare in China, where the supply chain is tightly managed and disruptions are minimal. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're being unfair to India. China didn't start off perfect either, and that's true. China in the 90s wasn't the manufacturing titan it is today. But here's the difference. When China committed to building its industrial base, it went all in. Government, education, infrastructure, workforce. They all moved in sync. And that's true. China in the 90s wasn't the manufacturing titan it is today. But here's the difference. When China committed to building its industrial base, it went all in. Government, education, infrastructure, workforce, they all moved in sync. India? It's got the talent, sure, but it also has red tape, inconsistent regulations, frequent power outages, massive corruption, and a patchwork logistics network that slows everything down. If a single screw is delayed in India, it could take days to sort out. In China, it's fixed in hours, maybe even minutes. And let's not forget the cultural mindset. China's supply chain thrives on hierarchy, speed, and responsibility. There's a deep-rooted respect for process and deadlines. In India, the work culture is different, more flexible, sometimes overly so. When you're trying to meet Apple's insane deadlines and sub-millimeter tolerances, flexible isn't what you want. But Rajesh will say, yeah, I'll do it next week. Even Indian government officials have admitted the challenges. In 2024, India's IT Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar said, "We are still in the learning curve." In 2024, India's IT Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar said, "We are still in the learning curve." And that's honest, but it's also a warning. Apple is betting billions on a system that's still figuring itself out. And yet the hype machine keeps spinning. People are calling India the next China. But here's the thing nobody says out loud: there might not be a next China. What China did, build a world-dominating manufacturing empire in just 3 decades, isn't easily replicated. It wasn't just cheap labor. It was scale, consistency, and government coordination at a level India hasn't even come close to matching. China trained tens of millions of workers, developed high-speed rail lines that connect factories like a circulatory system, and built whole cities around supply chains. Meanwhile in India, Apple suppliers are still struggling to hire enough skilled labor. One report showed that Foxconn had to bus in workers from over 100 kilometers away because there simply weren't enough trained workers nearby. That's not how you build a just-in-time manufacturing system. Let's also talk about costs. Everyone assumes India is cheaper, but it's not that simple. Everyone assumes India is cheaper, but it's not that simple. Mistakes cost money, delays cost money, training costs money. Apple might be saving on wages, but they're bleeding cash on quality control. And the optics? Not great. Videos have surfaced showing chaotic factory floors, misaligned machines, and untrained workers fumbling with delicate components. For a brand built on polish and perfection, that's a nightmare. There's even a political angle. Apple's expansion into India is part of a broader US push to decouple from China. But let's be real. Apple isn't moving because India's better. It's moving because Washington wants it to. That's not strategy, that's pressure. And it's a gamble, one that likely won't pay off, because if India can't deliver, where does Apple go next? Vietnam? Mexico? None of these places offer what China does, not even close. And here's a hard truth nobody wants to admit. Apple needs China more than China needs Apple. While Apple is important to China's tech exports, China has already moved up the value chain. It's building its own chip industries, its own consumer tech giants. Xiaomi, Huawei, BYD, they're all proof that China isn't just assembling anymore, it's innovating. India, meanwhile, is still stuck on basics. It doesn't yet have the ecosystem to support high-end manufacturing. You don't just need factories, you need precision tooling, robotics, logistics, engineers, and thousands of hyper-specialized suppliers. China has that. India doesn't. At least not yet. And time is money. Every day Apple spends trying to fix India's supply chain is a day lost in the race for the next big thing. Foldables, Arkansas glasses, AI hardware, they can't afford that. So, what's the end game? Sure, Apple might shift 10%, maybe even 20% of its production to India in the coming years, but make no mistake, China will remain the backbone of its supply chain for a long, long time. Because no matter how much politics tries to steer the ship, efficiency still rules the sea. And right now, nobody sails smoother than China. Want more truth bombs like this? Hit that subscribe button and check out our other videos. Thanks for watching.